Hi there, Daily Gardeners. Real quick, I just wanted to remind you that this month, the month of April, is the Reviews for Good month over at podchaser.com. And every time you leave a review and then I reply to that review, Podchaser will donate 50 cents to World Central Kitchen. And that's the organization that is providing meals to people fleeing Ukraine. And so far, they've provided over 1 million meals. So great cause. Take a second today, if you have a chance, and leave a review for the Daily Gardener over at podchaser.com. It's so easy to do, and so much good can come from it. Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Eblain, and today is April 14th. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of the German landscape and flower painter Helene Cramer, who was born on this day, April 14th, in 1844. Helen and her sister Molly were both painters in Hamburg, Germany, and their father, Saier, did not approve of them as painters, so the two women didn't start painting until middle age. Helen was 38 when she first picked up a brush. Helen and Molly exhibited their art throughout Germany and at the 1883 World's Fair in Chicago. Most folks say that their favorite Helene Cramer painting is her work called Marsh Marigolds and Crown Imperials. In 1916, Helen died at 72, and both she and Molly are buried in Plot 27 of the Garten der Frauen, or the Garden of Women, at the Hamburg-Ohlsdorf Cemetery. And today we celebrate the birthday of the nurseryman, printer, and garden writer Harry Saier, who was born on this day, April 14th, in 1888. In 1911, Harry started his seed company in Lansing, Michigan. And in the earliest newspaper ad that I could find that was placed by Harry back in 1916, he encouraged women to, quote, help beautify Lansing with a pretty home garden. Harry pledged, we supply everything necessary for making your home and lawn a beauty spot. We've assembled a rare collection of beautiful shrubs, trees, flowers, and seeds. Lovers of horticulture will find much to interest them here. Well, by the fall of that same year, Harry had posted an ad for, quote, a lady to canvass the city for shrubs, seeds, and garden supplies. 3 years later, Harry acquired a new building at number 3 West Michigan Avenue for his florist shop, and newspapers reported on it. Here's what they wrote. A resplendent posy shop is to open. One of the features of the shop will be an icebox, which will be the largest in the state of Michigan for its purpose. It will measure 12 by 6, and it's made entirely of glass and decorated with German silver trimmings. And the new marble tables will be arranged around a large fountain, which will occupy the center of the building. In 1926, Harry moved his operation to the Century Farm that he bought on Highway 99 in Dimondale. And it was here that Harry became known for producing his exceptional and exhaustive garden catalog. And he even included a pronunciation list, plant descriptions, and lots of miscellaneous advice. And throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s, if someone was looking for a plant or seeds, they would usually find their way to Harry as their last best hope. Now, I first learned about Harry in the book Onward and Upward in the Garden by the garden writer Catherine White. And here is the passage that she wrote about him, and it's the one that set me off trying to find out about Harry and then building a tree for him on Ancestry so I could figure out when he was born and then feature him today. Here's what Catherine wrote. Consider the case of Harry E. Saier, who issues 3 or 4 catalogs a year, each of them listing as many as 1,800 genera and 18,000 kinds of seed. Mr. Saier is not a grower, but a collector and distributor of seeds, and he primarily depends on his 200 seed collectors who are stationed all over the world and on commercial growers from many countries. There is nothing beautiful about his latest catalog and its 176 pages of small print lists, interspersed with occasional dim photographs. But it is fascinating to browse in, translating, if you can, the abbreviations made necessary by lack of space. His global list of clients include nurseries, greenhouses, seedsmen, universities, botanical gardens, and drug manufacturers. But a third of them, he tells me, are amateurs, like you and me. And just to spark your nostalgia for simpler times, listen to the garden writer Elizabeth Lawrence describing what it was like to order from Harry. I find most plantsmen send their wares without cash, even when they have never heard of you, but I certainly would never ask them to. I am always in debt to Mr. Saier because he sends things at odd times, and I wake up in the night and remember that I have owed him a quarter for 3 years. Now, you might be wondering how Harry's story ended. Well, he died in 1976, and when he died, J.L. Hudson inherited Harry's entire seed collection. And Harry's Diamondale property is now a cemetery. And it was on this day, April 14th, in 2017, that the Beijing Crabapple Conference began. Conference goers toured the Crabapple Garden, which featured many American cultivars like Brandywine, Cinderella, Molten Lava, Lollipop, and Madonna, and all of those varieties were created by Jim Zampini, a beloved nurseryman from Lake County, Ohio. During the conference, attendees learned that Jim had passed away at the age of 85, already 5 years ago. Today, Jim's legacy lives on in his fantastic crabapple varieties like Centurion, Harvest Gold, Lancelot Dwarf, Sugar Time, and the Weeping Candied Apple. Generally speaking, it takes 2 to 5 years for a crabapple tree to bear fruit. Now, crabapples differ from standard apple trees in that they offer smaller fruit. Apples that are less than 2 inches in diameter are considered crabapples. But here's another thing to keep in mind if you're trying to decide between an apple tree or a crabapple tree. Crabapples rarely grow taller than 25 feet high. So if you're looking for something on the smaller side, consider a crabapple. Now, if you want to plant a mini orchard of crabapple trees, space the saplings 6 to 15 feet apart, depending on the variety, and plant tighter if you're planting dwarf or more upright varieties. Right now, crabapple trees are just starting to bloom in our 2022 gardens, and most gardeners agree that there are few flowering trees that can rival the charm of a crabapple tree in flower. I have one in front of my cabin up in Wyoming, and I absolutely adore it, although I have to say that mine is not in bloom yet, but I already had to start pruning it, and rigorous pruning of your crabapples is definitely a must. Now, in Polish folklore, apple trees were considered dream trees, and sleeping under an apple tree was sure to cause a dream-filled sleep. And if you placed an apple under a maiden's pillow, she would dream of her future husband. Now, in English folklore, crabapple seeds were called pips, and they were thrown into the fire on Valentine's Day Eve. And if the pips exploded, your love would be true and would last forever. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Naturalist Book of Wildflowers by Laura Martin. This book came out in 2021, and the subtitle is Celebrating 85 Native Plants in North America. Great topic. Well, now, before I tell you about this book, I want to point out how talented Laura is. She got her degree in botany from the University of Georgia, and she has worked as a naturalist at Georgia's Callaway Gardens, and she even has a certificate in botanical art and illustration from the New York Botanical Gardens. And get this, she's published 25 books, and she's a true lover of nature. Now, when you see the cover of Laura's book, it's all the more special when you realize that she did all of these illustrations herself, even the ones on the cover of her book. Now, Laura dedicated this book to her grandchildren, and I wanted to share with you what she wrote in the introduction because it gives us a little insight into Laura as a person. She writes, "I have spent my entire life loving wildflowers. I grew up in the woods on the outskirts of the city, and because my mother was a wildflower enthusiast, I became one too." So we have another great example of the love of flowers, the love of gardening being passed down from one generation to the next. And then Laura continues, "I eventually acquired a bachelor's degree in botany and then a certification in botanical illustration, and the result is A Naturalist Book of Wildflowers, celebrating 85 native plants of North America. And the celebration features scientific text, interesting folklore, detailed botanical drawings, and whimsical sketches. I have learned to look at plants from many different angles, and I am happy to share this perspective with you." Now, as a gardener, I know you are going to love Laura's book, but even if you aren't all that much into gardening, don't be bashful about cracking open this book. Laura introduces us to these plants in a very, very friendly fashion. She's got one little paragraph here called Just a Little Botany, and she writes, "Although it's not essential to know botany to appreciate wildflowers, it might make it a little more fun and interesting. And botany is just the study of plants. And it's that gentle conversational tone that I think you're really going to like." Now, there's one other aspect that I want to share with you about this book, and that is there are all these little images, these little doodles that are on the margins. They're set off near the margins, and then the text is written around them. And she does these incredible drawings of her subjects. So she has the name of the plant, and then underneath it in a script font, she has the Latin name for the plant. And the drawing of the plant is beautiful, of course, but then it is what she puts around the plant and the way that she places this information that I think makes these drawings extra unique. So, for instance, when she's talking about the bellwort, at the very top, she says it's 12 to 20 inches high in script writing. So you feel like you're looking at somebody's scrapbook. And then she includes things like flowers 1 to 2 inches, long look closed, even when in full bloom. So it's little snippets like that, just marvelous, full of information and perspective that I don't think you'll find in many other books like this. And the publisher says, "A charmingly illustrated keepsake and guide to native wild plants of North America." So this book is truly a delight. It's 288 pages of North American wildflowers in their myriad of colors. And by the way, Laura organized this book by plant color, which is so helpful. So if you have a blue garden or a pink garden, you'll be able to go right away to those wildflowers and then look up the ones that you want to grow in your garden. You can get a copy of A Naturalist Book of Wildflowers by Laura Martin and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $8. Tremendous deal. All right, we end the show today with a botanic spark that features Kathleen Drew Baker, a British phycologist. Every year on this day, April 14th, since 1963, Japan celebrates Drew Day in honor of Kathleen Drew Baker. And I love this story so much that I actually shared it with my kids. We were having a meal together at a restaurant, and I couldn't resist telling them about it. Anyway, phycology is the study of algae, and Kathleen was the very first president of the British Phycological Society. Kathleen was utterly devoted to learning everything she could about these often dismissed sea plants. And although she was forced to give up lecturing at the University of Manchester after she got married because the college didn't allow married women to work, Kathleen continued on as an unpaid researcher. 2 decades later, in 1949, Kathleen figured out the mysterious life cycle of a red alga known as Welsh porphyra, and it's commonly called laver. Now, Kathleen had tried repeatedly to grow laver in the lab to no avail. But then, in a stroke of luck, she decided to toss some oyster shells in the bottom of a tank with the laver spores, and soon the oyster shells were covered in pink sludge. Unsure what to make of it, Kathleen feared that she had contaminated her own work, but she soon realized that the sludge was simply the juvenile part of the laver life cycle, and the shells provided much-needed shelter for the seeds. Kathleen's discovery was published in Nature magazine, and as luck would have it, a Japanese biologist named Sokichi Sagawa realized that Kathleen had probably just cracked the code on cultivating seaweed. Now, for centuries, Japan had harvested a sister variety of laver in order to make sushi. But unfortunately, the Japanese seaweed variety was getting harder and harder to source in the wild, and it had all but disappeared after World War II. Now, what the Japanese didn't realize was how important shells on the seafloor were to the seaweed life cycle. And it was irritants like American underwater mines from World War II, typhoons, and pollution that disrupted the life of bivalves like oysters, scallops, and mussels. And so they were in scarce supply. Now, without those shells, the Japanese red seaweed called nori couldn't reproduce. Kathleen's understanding of the seaweed life cycle meant that the Japanese now knew how to successfully farm nori seaweed, creating a stable supply for sushi. And it also meant that Japanese fishermen could feed their hungry, recovering nation and make a living. Kathleen's discovery birthed a new industry, the commercial practice of collecting oyster shells for seeding seaweed. After Kathleen's work proved successful, Japanese nori fishermen took up a collection for a statue to honor Kathleen. But before she could sit for the artist, Kathleen died of cancer at the age of 55. And so it was on this day, April 14th in 1963, that the Japanese unveiled a memorial to Kathleen. It's a slab of granite inset with a metal plaque with Kathleen's likeness, and it overlooks the Ariake Sea. And underneath the memorial are buried artifacts of Kathleen's scientific achievements, and they include scientific papers and her graduation gown and cap. And every April 14th to this day, the Japanese lay an offering of seaweed at Kathleen's shrine. While the rest of the world is largely unaware of Kathleen Drew Baker, in Japan, Kathleen is remembered as the Mother of the Sea. Isn't that precious? Hey, real quick, I'm taking off tomorrow, Friday, and Monday for Easter break. So have a wonderful Easter, and we'll get back together on Tuesday. Well, that's it for today's show. Just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.